Greetings, fellow aliens. Welcome to the 20th episode of Earthlings 101. Today, we will talk about the strange Earthling concept of magic. What is magic? How does it supposedly work? What does it have to do with science and religion? What's the psychology behind it? Why are Earthlings so into it, even today? And what are Zogg's 3 rules of magic? If that sounds like something you're interested in, watch on. Since the dawn of their species, Earthlings have tried to understand how the world works and what to do about it. What causes thunderstorms? Why do crops grow? Why does the sun cross the sky? Where do people go when they die? There are basically 3 approaches. The first approach is based upon the idea that everything that happens is caused by powerful invisible people, gods. The thunderstorm comes from an angry sky god. Crops grow because the earth goddess makes them grow. The sun crosses the sky because the sun god rides across the sky on a burning mammoth. And people die because the god of death takes them away. This is called religion. The second possibility is that the world is a big mindless mechanism consisting of things and driven by causality, following rules called laws of physics. You can't bargain with these rules, all you can do is find and exploit them. The find part is called science, the exploit part is known as technology. And then there's a third approach, magic. It's somewhere between religion and science. The idea is that the world is driven by hidden connections and maybe invisible sentient beings of limited power, such as demons, angels, jinns, ghouls, fae folk, ancestral spirits, etc. The important thing is that those spiritual beings are subject to rules, and if you know those rules, you can make them do what you want, summon them, bribe them, repel them, bargain with them, etc. The same holds for hidden connections between things and symbols, between heaven and earth. They obey rules you can use to your advantage. Understanding how the world works isn't a purely intellectual exercise, it has a very practical aspect. Why did my aunt get sick? Why did my apples get all mushy? Why did my goat die? Was it my nasty neighbor? I'm pretty sure it was her. But how did she do it? How can I protect myself against her? And how can I get back at her, make her aunt sick, her apples mushy, and her goat die? Those questions drive Earthlings to pursue religion, science, and magic. Some Earthling and alien anthropologists thought those 3 disciplines were stages in the development of Earthling societies. Magic is the most primitive way of understanding the world, followed by religion, and eventually superseded by science. But this doesn't hold up. Throughout history, religion, magic and science have coexisted like 3 closely connected 𝐂𝐻𝐬𝐬 hive monasteries. So, religion, magic and science are not stages, they are schools of thought, sometimes concurring but often complementing each other. We will come back to this. Let's look at some examples. Earthlings have been practicing magic since the dawn of civilization. A Mesopotamian clay tablet from the 2nd millennium BC tells us how to cure a dog bite. Take some clay and rub the outside of the wound with it. Fashion a dog from clay and place it on the north wall directly in the sun. Recite the following incantation 3 times over it until the dog surrenders its moisture and the person's bite dries up. Here, we see a fundamental principle of magic, the law of sympathy. Things are considered connected through either similarity or contact. The wound is in contact with the clay on the wound, which is similar to the clay used to create the dog sculpture, which is similar to the dog who caused the wound. We will come back to this later. An Earthling friend of mine was born in Ghana, West Africa. The day before he left Africa to live in France, 2 things happened. First, the family's cat went missing. Second, my friend's mother served him a delicious rabbit stew as a farewell meal. Turns out the 2 events were connected. One of the cat's claws turned up on my friend's plate. The mum explained that when you kill the cat, bury its skull in the middle of the house and make someone eat its flesh, they won't die until they come back to this house. The idea was to make her son immortal as long as he stayed in Europe. So far, the magic worked, he's alive and well. You'll find magic practices like this all over Africa. However, magic isn't reserved for third world countries. Around 1970, the ethnologist Jean Favre traveled to the Bocage in the countryside of Normandy, France, to study the local practices of magic. At first, nobody admitted that they believed in magic. Yes, there might be dowsers, touch healers, magnetizers, diviners and anti-witches, but not here, only in the next village where they still believed in that sort of stuff. But when Favre took on the role of assistant to an anti-witch, she discovered that people took magic way more seriously. The clients were generally families who had a streak of bad luck, loss of money, sickness, dying animals, etc. Somebody had told them they might have been bewitched, so they turned to the anti-witch, who performed a series of rituals. Suddenly, our ethnologist found herself in the midst of an imaginary mortal combat fought with words. In this magic belief system, words can be deadly weapons. If the streak of bad luck ended or the supposed witch had an accident, it was considered a victory; if not, it was a defeat. Both possible outcomes were seen as confirmation that magic works. Don't dismiss those beliefs as the superstitions of uneducated French peasants. Magic is present on all continents, in all countries and in all parts of modern society. For example, many city dwellers in first world countries believe in crystal healing, a magical belief that goes back about 6,000 years. The idea is that crystals such as quartz, moonstone, amethyst or lapis lazuli have healing properties based on shape, color, and markings. Rose quartz, for example, has the color of roses, an earthling symbol for love. It is believed to increase love and help with emotional healing, especially when worn near the heart. Here, we find again the principles of similarity and contact. Business-minded crystal sellers will tell their clients that crystals must be recharged with spiritual energy, for example in the moonlight. So you better buy more stones to alternate between them. You can even buy crystal charging stations on the internet. Healing crystals are big business. The worldwide market size for healing crystals was about $1.2 billion in 2020, and it's growing. The US makes up more than a third of the market share. Other magical trinkets are equally popular. I think it's only a matter of time until someone invents a smart dream catcher with an app telling you when it is supposedly filled with bad dreams and starts emitting bad energy. When this happens, it must be cleansed with a crystal energy contraption, sold separately for $199. Crystal batteries not included. Another very lucrative branch of magic is the ancient Chinese art of feng shui, a discipline concerned with the orientation of buildings and furniture relative to the flow of life energy, or qi. It's strongly linked to the 5 Chinese elements: metal, water, wood, fire and earth, which correspond to colors, materials, concepts, shapes, directions, etc. Conceived initially to orient tombs to increase the comfort of dead ancestors, feng shui is now widely used in architecture and interior design for people who are still pretty much alive, and not only in China. The Sydney Opera, for example, combines the proximity to water with the shape of triangles, a feng shui symbol of fire. Again, the laws of sympathy, contact with water, similarity with fire. Another example is the Columbus Circle in New York. It's a big roundabout, similar to a water whirlpool, a symbolic maelstrom of qi flow. When the Trump Tower was built next to the roundabout, Trump's feng shui advisors were concerned that this spiritual whirlpool would suck up all the wealth. So, the flow of qi energy was disrupted by a round shape, the Columbus Circle globe. I doubt that Trump believes in feng shui, but he certainly believes in Chinese investors. If you still don't think magic is everywhere, walk into a skyscraper in a US city and look for the 13th floor. Odds are you won't find it, because the number 13 is considered unlucky in the USA. Lucky and unlucky numbers are textbook examples of magical thinking. Japanese consider the numbers 4 and 9 unlucky. That's supposedly the reason why there's neither a Windows 9 nor an iPhone 9. When Earthlings hear the word magic, they usually think of magic in movies, books or games. Magic in fiction is easy to define: it's anything that isn't possible in reality and isn't explained away with scientific mumbo-jumbo. In other words, magic is when you break the laws of physics. Yet that fictional magic is a far cry from real-world attempts to practice magic. No law of sympathy, no hidden connections, no consultation of the stars, and rarely the help of spiritual beings. Spells in fiction are like cheat codes in video games. Just lift your wand and say incendio. Even alchemy is reduced to mere potion making. So, magic in fiction is when you break the laws of physics. But this works only in fiction. If you could really cure a dog bite by drying a clay dog, or kill your neighbor's cow by speaking French, or make an object levitate with a spell, that wouldn't be breaking the laws of physics, that would be new laws of physics. The whole breaking the laws of physics approach only works when you have one reference universe that defines the laws of physics and another universe where those laws of physics can be broken. If it were possible to do the impossible, it wouldn't be impossible anymore. Of course, you can break the known laws of physics. But that's not magic, that's progress. The only place where you can break the laws of physics is Aldebaran 2, because on this planet, laws of physics have to be ratified by the Shadow Council, are enforced by the physics police, and breaking them is punished with lunar exile. Tips for tourists. Stage magic is a popular Earthling entertainment. It has little to do with magic, but Earthlings love it. Some alien tourists find the tricks too basic and try to improve them with a portable transmogrifier. However, don't push it too far, and make sure the transmogrifier has enough battery to reverse the effects. A common misconception is that believing in magic is inherently stupid. Yet, when you try to think like an Earthling, it kind of makes sense. Allow me to elaborate. Imagine you're a hunter-gatherer during the last ice age. You see a lightning bolt setting a tree on fire, and you wonder what happened. One idea would be that somebody in the sky was really angry with that tree, that would be religion. Another approach would be that there is fire in the sky, maybe above the stars. And some of it fell down onto the tree. That would be science, not very accurate science, but hey, you're in the Stone Age. A third idea would be that you just witnessed some drama between cloud spirits and a fire spirit, which made the fire spirit jump down and assault a tree spirit. Maybe, if you ask very politely and offer the fire spirit something to eat, he will give you one of his children to cook your famous mammoth stew. That approach would be magic. My point is that the magic explanation is just as wild a guess as the other two ideas, albeit more entertaining. Now, imagine you're a peasant in ancient Mesopotamia. Your child gets severe stomach pain, so you seek the advice of professionals. First, you see an ASU, a medical practitioner who treats illnesses empirically, a man of science. He diagnoses indigestion and prescribes some herbal tea. Twice a day before meals. You also ask a priest, he advises you to sacrifice a duck to the healing goddess 𝐂𝐤𝐬. Finally, you ask an Arzipu, a magic healer, he thinks the pain is caused by a demon and suggests a ritual to drive him out. You're a simple man, not an expert in science, religion or magic, so you don't know whom to trust. You don't know how the world really works, nobody knows. You try one method, maybe a second one, and if that doesn't help, the third one. That's a perfectly reasonable approach. Let's fast forward to modern times. Now you're a farmer in the French countryside and are in a similar situation, you've had a streak of bad luck, your cattle have become ill, your car has broken down, and now your child is sick. Science has progressed enough to tell you that the sickness is severe, possibly fatal, but the question is what to do about it. You're skeptical of authority and don't trust the pharmaceutical industry, the Catholic Church isn't what it used to be, and you never believed in that magic stuff. But you're desperate, so you have to pick one, or your child may die. The doctor prescribes you some pills against the pain and tells you that there's not much more he can do. The priest advises you to pray for your kid, but that doesn't help either. Now, a friend tells you that your family might have been bewitched. So you turn to the anti-witch, who proposes a course of action. First, find the witch, and then perform a ritual to break the spell and save the child. Would you give it a try, or would you let your child die? It would be wrong to attribute that to gullibility. Earthlings are inherently skeptical, which is a good thing because skepticism is what drives science forward. Earthling science really took off in the 16th century, when European scientists started to doubt the old established science of celestial spheres, elements and bodily humors. Ancient science was based on knowledge, modern science is based on doubt. But the flip side is that many people are now skeptical of that modern doubt-driven science and sympathize with other worldviews that promise certainty, agency and meaning, religion and magic. That may not be rational, when you define rational as trusting only empirical data, and it may appear illogical to spacefaring aliens, but for Earthlings, it's perfectly reasonable. Magic is sometimes compared with an airship of the Aquilarian arachnids. Such a ship is held together and controlled by a complex web of silk. To steer the ship, the crew literally has to pull some strings. Some parts of the ship are operated by Earthlings, which are controlled by string signals. That corresponds to spiritual magic. Other parts of the ship work automatically, with pneumatic mechanisms triggered by strings. That's natural magic. There are also strings that run the opposite way, they come from the bowels of the ship and end in status displays on the bridge. That's divination. As mentioned in other episodes, Earthlings are obsessed with things, tangible objects, celestial bodies, graphical symbols, abstract concepts etc. Their whole universe consists of things. Now, the concept of magic is based on the idea that all the things in the universe are somehow connected with invisible strings, like the parts of an arachnid airship. All you have to do is pull the right strings to make the universe do what you want. We can use that to define magic. Magic is the exploitation of hidden connections in the universe. As the Earthling concept of humility is foreign to me, I will call this Zogg's first law of magic. So, according to magic, everything is connected. But how do you find out what is connected to what? That's where the laws of sympathy come in. Magic connections are based on similarity or contact. The law of similarity connects things of similar shape, color, material, etc. A walnut kernel is shaped like a brain, so walnuts are good for your brain. A voodoo doll looks like your neighbor, so the doll is connected to your neighbor. A citrine stone has the color of gold, so it attracts prosperity. The law of contact, or contagion, means touching something can create magic connections. A rose quartz over your heart helps with love and emotional healing. Touching holy water is beneficial to you unless you are a vampire. A voodoo doll is more effective when you add a lock of the target's hair, called a taglock. You can curse someone using something they have touched. The latter example shows that the contact can be in the past, before magic comes into play. In other words, magic isn't supposed to act directly through similarity and contact, but to surf on a network of invisible connections created by similarity and contact. The hidden fabric of reality, if you will. In other words, magic doesn't create those connections, it exploits them. I think the laws of sympathy may come from the observation of contagious diseases. When a cow gets sick, the cow next to it is more likely to get the same disease than your neighbor's cows, or your chickens, or the pet falcon of your liege lord. But it's not just an observation, those laws of similarity and contact seem to be hard-coded into Earthlings' instincts. Scientific advice. You can test this for yourself. When you serve Earthlings chocolate ice cream in the shape of human excrement, they will react with disgust. The same happens when you offer them water that has been in contact with sterilized cockroaches. They will even be reluctant to sleep in bunk beds when you tell them you intend to use those beds to transport leprosy patients to a medical space station. Magic is based on the idea that a complex web connects everything in the universe. The point is that Earthlings are part of this web. This is called participation. Magic works through human participation in the universe. There are three forms of participation: transcendence, transformation and transaction. Transcendence means that the universe influences you, and you can do nothing about it, like a marionette controlled by strings. A classic example is astrology, the idea that planets and stars shape human life. Transformation means pulling the strings of the universe to make a thing change from one state to another, healing a person or making someone fall in love, or even changing the very essence of something, turning lead into gold or a boy into a warrior. The latter is sometimes instead called transmutation to indicate the difference. Finally, transaction means that Earthlings can bargain with the universe. You can ask a spiritual being about the future, this is divination. You can organize a feast for your ancestors to gain their support. You can appease angry fae with gifts. You can appeal to angels to help you. Or you can summon a demon to do your bidding, usually for a price. The universe is one big marketplace of favors. We will come back to that. Some of this transactional magic is based on the idea that luck, prosperity etc., behave similarly to things like money. When you're unlucky, someone must have stolen your luck. When your cow ceases to give milk, some neighbor's cow must give more milk, etc. This is called the limited good theory. This also works with bad things like illnesses. A widespread belief is that you can pass misfortune or bad luck to someone else with the evil eye. Transactions may involve offerings, giving some precious things away. These things can be left out in the open, buried, placed in a lake or river, tossed into the sea, burned, or thrown into a volcano. When the offerings are animals or even people, one speaks of sacrifice. If you stick with the web metaphor, transcendence would be incoming strings, transformation means outgoing strings, and transactions are communication lines with beings that are better connected than oneself. The most important connections are arguably those that link the macrocosmos and the microcosmos. Constellations and planets up there are connected to metals, processes, concepts, life, etc., down here. That's the basic idea behind astrology. This principle is often summarized in the sentence, as above, so below, as below, so above. Note that this is not a binary, on the contrary, it's a mystical identity. A more accurate translation would be, the above is from the below is from the above.
إن الأعلى من الأسفل والأسفل من الأعلى.
Symbols are a key element of magic. Remember the arachnid ships. On the bridge and control stations of such a ship, you find knobs and levers attached to strings, you pull or push them to operate the ship. In a magical worldview, symbols work similarly. Those are things used to operate magic connections, often things created explicitly for that purpose. You draw a sigil to summon a demon, you prick a voodoo doll to hurt your enemy, you don an amulet to protect yourself against the evil eye, and so on. Some symbols work the other way as a receiver, like the displays on the bridge. The universe determines the tarot cards you draw, the pattern of tea leaves in your teacup, and whether or not the groundhog sees its shadow. One way or another, the symbols are linked to whatever they symbolize. Sometimes, this goes even further, the symbol is identical to the symbolized. The picture on the cave wall is not only linked to the mammoth you want to hunt tomorrow, the picture is the mammoth. By symbolically killing the picture, you kind of kill the mammoth in advance. We're speaking of mystical identity, of course, you still need to go out and actually kill it. Likewise, the idol is the deity it represents, the picture is the person, the amulet is protection, and the above is the below. Let's call this Zogg's second law, the symbol is identical with that which is symbolized. Deep down in the central containment facility at 𝐂𝐬𝐬1, there is anomaly number 2287. It's an old-fashioned globe of the planet Rigel 2, the home planet of the ocean-dwelling Tritonids, complete with trenches, cities, seamounts, imaginary land monsters and annotated rivers for fearless explorers of the 7 continents. However, it is strangely connected to the planet itself. Touching it triggers a seaquake at exactly the same spot, blowing on it causes storms, and cooling it makes the ocean freeze. It's as if the globe and the planet were, in some strange way, one and the same thing. Needless to say, the anomaly is under the strictest possible containment protocols. When you have a working voodoo doll of a whole planet, you don't want it to fall into the wrong tentacles. The word magic comes from the Magus, plural magoi, the ancient Greek word for Zoroastrian fire priests in Persia. The Greeks were suspicious of their strange rituals and practices. For them, magia was foreign, and to Earthlings, all that is foreign is suspicious. In contrast to their own practices of sorcery and divination, which were not suspicious at all. I'm pretty sure the Persians felt exactly the other way round. This illustrates the concept that magic is foreign. The magic of the other has always evoked both rejection and curiosity. Early Christians and Roman pagans accused each other of witchcraft. Christians and Muslims sought each other's magic help to cure patients. In Europe, Romani people were and are believed to have a talent for both fortune-telling and curses. And modern magic in the West often borrows concepts and artifacts from other parts of the world: Chinese talismans, Indian chakra stones, Native American dream catchers, Kabbalistic sephirot, African amulets. Everything is mixed in one big exotic New Age stew, seasoned with hemp and magic mushrooms. A similar idea is the notion that magic is old. When you want to sell a magic grimoire or a handbook on alchemy, you better not tell anyone you wrote it last year in your mom's garage. It will sell way better when you claim that it comes from ancient Egypt, written by a savant who was friends with Hermes Trismegistus, translated into Hebrew by King Solomon, lost in the ruins of the temple and rediscovered by the Arabs, brought to Europe by the Crusaders, locked away in the archives of the Vatican, and eventually retrieved by a courageous Romani cleaning lady, who then sold it to you exclusively. That is a credential for a magic text. More generally speaking, the older a document is, the more wisdom and powerful magic it is thought to contain. I think the idea that old documents contain a lot of wisdom comes from a fallacious analogy to old people. Traditionally, elderly Earthlings have been considered sources of wisdom, because of their life experience, and also their societal role as custodians of oral tradition. When an Earthling girl needs some advice, maybe in matters of love, she will seek guidance from her grandma rather than her younger brother, because grandma has a lot more experience in the subject. However, an old document isn't like your grandma, it's like your grandma's childhood diary. It will certainly bring a new perspective, but its age doesn't make it wise, because unlike grandmas, diaries and documents don't accumulate wisdom over time. They just lay around collecting dust, while the world around makes progress, invents the light bulb, relativity, disco music, modern quantum mechanics and the avocado toast. So, ancient documents are not inherently wiser, they are part of mankind's childhood diary. Magic symbols come in all shapes and forms. Some are literal shapes, like astrological symbols, the figures you find in magic books or the characters of magic alphabets. Some are words or sentences, usually spoken as spells, like the weaponized words in the 𝐂𝐚𝐲𝐬𝐬. They can also be written down, for example as part of protective amulets. Names are considered very potent words. Knowing and speaking someone's true name may give you power over them, or may incur their wrath. Rumpelstiltskin is vanquished because somebody learns his name. You can curse someone by writing their name on a lead tablet. And the one true name of God shall not be spoken. Or take demonic rituals, to summon a demon, you must know their name. You subdue them by speaking the names of God, confine them inside a triangle with the name of an archangel, and protect yourself with divine names written around a magical circle and on your clothing. A variant of true names is sigils, geometrical figures considered secret signatures of spirits such as demons or angels. Those often appear in magical books called grimoires. I will come back to those. Note that those secret names and sigils do not follow the laws of sympathy. On the contrary, they seem to be conceived such that they are difficult to guess. Think of passwords and online identities in the great galactic grid, but for demons. Numbers are also thought to have magic properties, like lucky or unlucky numbers, or the number of the beast. Magic and mysticism linked to numbers are called numerology. Numerology plays a role in the Kabbalah, a branch of Jewish mysticism based upon the concept of divine powers or Sephiroth, a tree of life, and the female aspect of the divine. You also find numbers or characters arranged in magic squares or triangles. Drawings and figures have been used since prehistoric times to perform magic, not surprisingly because of the law of similarity. A more modern variant is photographs. In some cultures, people don't want you to take pictures because they fear those might be used to cast spells against you. Masks and costumes may seem similar, but are used differently. Earthlings wear them in rituals to transform into animals, supernatural beings or ancestral spirits. Other objects used in magic include small and big sticks, vessels, metal discs, weapons, plants, body parts of humans and animals, smoke devices, lighting devices, sound devices and optical devices. Amulets, talismans and charms may be the most frequent types of magic objects. Charms are thought to generally attract good luck. Talismans are supposed to attract more specific positive qualities or energies, and amulets are used to protect against evil or misfortune. Some high-risk professions, like pilots, athletes, performers, gamblers and soldiers, seem particularly drawn to use good luck charms. I will come back to that at the end of the video. Some places are also considered magical, like graveyards, creepy old houses and ancient monuments. A special kind of place is liminal spaces, passages between places, neither here nor there, like doors, chimneys, crossroads, bridges, passes and gates. Maybe we should add mirrors and crystal balls because they look like portals into parallel universes. Many spells include burying something at a crossroads or hanging something in a chimney. Doors are often protected with symbols, inscriptions or objects. Moments in time can also be liminal, dusk and dawn, midnight, equinoxes and solstices, as well as moments between different phases of life and or social groups, coming of age, joining the army, marriage, childbirth, graduating, joining a religion, and so on. Those are often celebrated with magic rites of passage. If you have ever dealt with the central galactic bureaucracy, you know that in order to get things done, you must have connections, know the communication codes of officers and clerks in the right office, ideally people who owe you a favor or who can be bribed, blackmailed or otherwise controlled. Illegal comcode directories, aka bureaucratic yellow pages, sell on the black market for a high price, even more so if they contain additional information on the different clerks. Spiritual magic works the same way, but with spiritual beings. That is the transactional aspect of magic I was talking about. It's all about contacting helpful beings, such as ancestors, saints, and angels, dangerous beings, such as demons, devils, and ghouls, and beings who may be both helpful and dangerous, such as ghosts, and jinns. You can plead with them, bargain with them, appease them with offerings or force them to do your bidding. But you often need a name, incantation, or sigil to call them and make them do what you want. There are compendia of those contact details called grimoires, sometimes with tips and tricks on conjuring demons, lists of useful tools, working schedules of angels, depictions of the devil, cosmological diagrams, and other helpful information. Most grimoires are basically textbooks on ritual magic, combined with the yellow pages of heaven and hell. A funny detail about demon summoning rituals is that grimoires typically advise layers and layers of symbols, polygrams and divine names to protect the summoner, like a 17th century star fortress, but only minimal containment measures for the summoned creature. It's almost as if releasing an infernal abomination onto the plane of mortals would be fine, as long as the summoner isn't harmed. There are also spiritual beings you won't find in any directory, local nature spirits, like Kodama, nymphs, moss people, leshies, fauns, rusalki, or fey folk, also called fairies. But even they can be bargained with. The fae of Irish and British folklore, for example, can supposedly be appeased with food and trinkets, or fend off with iron, salt, charms, church bells or by turning your clothes inside out. Needless to say, modern science didn't find any fairies, ghosts, or other invisible creatures that influence the fate of Earthlings. Except for the microbes. Some aliens think that the belief in Fey folk is a cultural memory of encounters with other hominids in the early Iron Age, hence the Fey's fear of iron. But Fey lore is actually way younger. We know that because the largest ever alien study on Earthlings was conducted about 1,500 standard cycles ago by the Eldefar Institute for Primitive Planetary Studies, and they didn't record any Fey lore. Allow me to elaborate. The Eldefari established several hidden bases in Ireland and Great Britain, with a large network of cleverly dissimulated portals. Over several decades, they conducted tens of thousands of experiments on abducted Earthlings. As required by regulations back then, abducted infants were routinely replaced with nearly perfect clones. The natives didn't like this, and tensions rose. When a scientist was attacked with farm tools and died of iron poisoning, the Eldefari took steps to improve relations. Giving away information or technology was out of the question, so they used alien tools to help with chores, cure illnesses or give security advice for mining operations. Regulations about contact with natives were less strict back then. In the end, relations stayed ambiguous, but the Eldefari were able to gather a lot of information. But I digress. What I mean to say, is that Eldefari research teams are usually well organized, follow strict protocols and are known for thorough reports. However, the reports on local legends and folklore do not mention any Fey lore yet. So, nobody really knows where the legends about the Fey folk may come from. All we know is that they must have been invented less than 1,500 cycles ago. Folk magic is often based on spiritual magic. Magic practitioners, or cunning folk as they were once called in Europe, deal with healing, fortune-telling, love magic, finding treasures or stolen property, horoscopes, and most importantly of all, defense against witches. Today, witchcraft is often used as a synonym for folk magic. But initially, it meant weaponized magic, spells used to inflict harm or misfortune on someone. The practice of witchcraft was arguably way less frequent than accusations of witchcraft, a great way to get rid of your annoying neighbor. In the early modern period, Europe and colonial America went into a craze of witch hunting. Around 50,000 supposed witches were executed, mostly hung, by Catholics and Protestants alike. By the way, the Spanish Inquisition was rather after heretics. They executed in total 2 supposed witches. If you think persecutions of supposed witches are a thing of the past, you are mistaken. Even in this century, alleged practitioners of witchcraft and sorcery are still publicly beheaded in Saudi Arabia, burned in Ghana, executed by firing squad in Somalia, or lynched in South Africa and India. Some societies treat witchcraft in a more civilized manner. The Azande people in Central Africa have no concept of bad luck or accidents. Misfortune is always thought to be caused by witchcraft, from illness to being crushed by a collapsed granary. For the Azande, witchcraft comes from a substance in the belly and is largely unintentional. The substance is passed on from father to son and from mother to daughter, and grants the power to bewitch someone over a short distance, without even realizing what you did. Say, a woman with that belly power really doesn't like her neighbor. So, when he's in range of her power, she may involuntarily bewitch him. In consequence, he is bitten by a snake. To save his life, action must be taken. First, an oracle is performed, and the witch is identified. Then, a dignitary is informed, who sends a messenger to the accused witch. He politely informs her of the incident and her role in it. The witch then apologizes, assures the messenger that she didn't want to injure anyone and wishes the victim health and happiness. Then the witch symbolically spits out her witchcraft, and the matter is closed. No hard feelings. Today, women who practice harmless folk magic often call themselves witches. But centuries ago, witch was by definition the title of a job meant to harm people, like pirate, ninja, mercenary or, arguably, Viking. In other words, witches were not wrongfully accused harmless people, but harmless people were wrongfully accused of being witches. Witches were often thought to have concluded a pact with the devil, a common theme in European folklore and literature. Pacts with the devil range from a friends with benefits arrangement to selling one's soul. Strategic advice. If you attack Earth with specifically bioengineered soldiers, you might design them like demons. Odds are Earthlings will try to fend them off with magical defenses like holy symbols and incantations. However, make sure your troops are not vulnerable to sonic attacks and hydric acid. Otherwise, church bells and holy water might actually prove quite effective. Divination is the art of using magic to learn about the future, or, more generally, answer some questions. This is often seen as interrogating supernatural entities or even gods, hence the name. In that, it fringes on religion. Some, if not most, polytheistic religions are intertwined with magic. But even monotheistic religions contain elements of magic. In the Catholic faith, for example, the bread does not only symbolize the body of Christ. It is his body. The wine is his blood, the cross is salvation, next Easter Sunday is the day he rises from his grave. If that's not magic, I don't know what is. The symbol is identical with the symbolized. And why not? Religion claims to speak about something too great for the human mind to understand. To do so, it translates that hypothetical unintelligible greatness into intelligible archetypes, images deeply rooted in Earthlings' unconscious. The father, the enemy, the mother, the innocent, the hero, the sacrifice, and so on. What better way to access those archetypes than using the language of symbols in conjointly celebrated rituals? And why not throw in a little magic to soothe the soul and appeal to the unconscious? But what do I know? I'm a mere space alien, I don't even have an unconscious, let alone an immortal soul. Where to draw the line between spiritual magic and religion? In both systems, you appeal to supernatural beings, so what's the difference? I think the distinction is whether or not the Earthling has a certain degree of agency. If you're beseeching an all-powerful being to help you, it's religion. But if you have a certain amount of power over that being, it's magic. More generally, when the success of a ritual mainly depends on whether the ritual is done right, it's magic. When it's just praying with extra steps, it's religion. I give you an example. In 17th century France, there was the belief that the hands of the king had healing powers. Thousands of sick persons would line up on Easter to be touched by the king, with the words, "The king touches you, God heals you." That is clearly a magic power, albeit granted by God. However, in 1722, the sentence was changed into, "The king touches you, may God heal you." So, the king's touch is no longer a power granted by God, but a mere plea to God. The spell has become a prayer, magic has surrendered to religion. An Earthling told me that Catholic bishops are forbidden to go to the swimming pool, because one false hand movement, and everything is holy water. That's some powerful magic. But maybe that's what Earthlings call a joke, I'm not sure. What if you want to do magic, but you're an introverted nerd who has neither the inclination nor the people skills to haggle with spiritual beings? Then natural magic is for you. It's the opposite of spiritual magic, using hidden connections in the universe without involving angels or demons. But are scientists not basically looking for the same thing? Indeed. That's why the distinction between natural magic and science is somewhat fuzzy, especially before the modern age. The scientific method may doubt the central tool of scientific research. Before that, European science relied more on knowledge, especially old, established knowledge. All-time favorites were the four elements, the theory of humors, Neoplatonism, everything Aristotle had written, and Hermetism. Hermetism is a philosophical and religious tradition supposedly created by Hermes Trismegistus, an imaginary inventor of magic, combining the gods Hermes and Thoth. One of his supposed magic abilities was to seal treasure chests so nothing could get in, hence the expression hermetic seal. The core texts of Hermetism, the Corpus Hermeticum, treat questions like the nature of the divine, body and soul, and the path to enlightenment. The sentence "as above so below" comes from one of those texts, the Emerald Tablet. Hermetic cosmology is based on the cosmology of the ancient Greeks. Ancient Greek cosmology plays a unique role in European magic. The idea was that the Earth was at the center of a series of concentric celestial spheres for the Moon, the Sun, the planets and the last one for the stars. Ptolemy added smaller orbits to the model to account for the odd movement of the planets in the sky. Each sphere was thought to be moved by its containing spheres, with the outermost sphere moved by a prime mover, aka God. That's the idea behind astrology. The cosmos is moved from the top to the bottom, the macrocosmos drives the microcosmos, the stars and planets affect people's lives. This idea may come from the observation that the sun and moon do indeed influence day, night, the seasons, the tides, etc. Speculating that other celestial bodies also influence people's lives is not that far-fetched. Plus, as wrong as it was, Ptolemy's model allowed relatively accurate prediction of the odd movements of the planets, which seemed to validate the whole cosmological model. Back then, astronomy and astrology weren't really different sciences. More generally speaking, before modern science, magic was not really separated from science and technology. Both were attempts to find hidden connections in the cosmos, and to use them to one's advantage. A grounded iron rod attracting thunderbolts or a compass needle turning to the North Star seemed like magic, the use of not-so-obvious connections between microcosmos and macrocosmos. To give another example, the idea of turning lead into gold is not so different from turning copper and tin into bronze. both look like the magic of transformation. In many pre-industrial cultures, metalworking is associated with magic and is frequently accompanied by magical rituals, such as spilling the blood of a black goat all over a new furnace. Those rituals have presumably been transmitted over generations, intermingled with technical instructions on metalwork. Let's call that my third law of magic: any sufficiently primitive technology is indistinguishable from magic. In modern times, the line between magic and science is easier to draw. Science is based on methodically acquired empirical evidence, magic is rooted in supposed ancient knowledge that is not questioned. Practices that claim to be science but are not grounded in evidence are referred to as pseudoscience. An example of pseudoscience is the so-called alternative medicine. By definition, practices of alternative medicine have either not been proven to work, or have been proven not to work. When there's evidence that a remedy actually works, it's simply called medicine. Proponents of alternative medicine often claim to be opposed to Big Pharma. Yet, the global alternative medicine market is estimated to yield hundreds of billions of dollars annually. Some pseudoscientific practices could be considered magic. An example is a branch of alternative medicine called homeopathy. It's based on two ideas, like cures like, and potentiation. Like cures like means that illnesses can be cured by things that cause similar symptoms in healthy patients. For example, sleeplessness can be cured with coffee. The second idea is that remedies become stronger when diluted in lots and lots of water. The water is believed somehow to retain the properties of the remedy through contact. If that sounds familiar, it's because that's basically the laws of sympathy, similarity and contact. Homeopathy is sympathetic magic in disguise. Some alien textbooks get homeopathy wrong. They claim that it supposedly works like this: with every dilution, the percentage of the agent drops, until it gets negative. Now we have a negative amount of an agent that causes the symptoms, so the solution will reduce the symptoms. That argument is delightfully stupid and might convince some space squids, but it won't work on Earthlings. Those who are stupid enough to fall for it will be too stupid to understand it. Not all alternative medicine is magic, though. Some is just bad science combined with smart marketing. Take the term detox, for example. In just 2 short syllables, it invents an imaginary problem, and proposes a supposed remedy. From a marketing standpoint, this is pure genius. Besides alternative medicine, the most popular branch of modern magic is arguably divination, using magic to obtain answers. Sometimes, this involves Earthlings in some sort of trance, often induced by psychoactive drugs. Other versions are based on random events. 𝐂𝐻𝐸𝐻 is a divination technique that is very popular in China. It is based on the principles of yin and yang, represented by broken and unbroken lines. When you group those lines in groups of 3, you get 8 trigrams representing heaven, wind, water, mountain, earth, thunder, fire and lake. Now, to practice 𝐂𝐻𝐸𝐻, you first formulate a question. Then you randomly determine 6 lines with coins or other methods, which yields a double trigram or hexagram, such as wind over lake. Each hexagram has a specific meaning, like inner truth, which you look up and interpret as an answer to your question. Tarot divination works similarly. It's based on 78 cards, 56 ordinary suit cards, 21 trumps called major arcana and 1 fool card. Tarot is a game of metaphors. Each card has a specific metaphorical meaning, not unlike the hexagrams of the 𝐂𝐻𝐸𝐻 or the Sephiroth of the Kabbalah. A simple reading method is the 3-card spread. You formulate your question, shuffle your deck, lay 3 cards out, and interpret them together as a story. The cards, especially the trump cards, are not random drawings but correspond more or less to archetypes, images deeply ingrained in Earthlings' collective unconscious. More on that later. We already mentioned astrology. Western, Chinese and Hindu astrologers agree on the idea that the position of celestial bodies at the time of an Earthling's birth influences their character and their life. Those positions are usually noted on an astrological chart, a square or circular diagram. The stars are also consulted for guidance on decisions, particularly to determine the optimal times for specific actions. Astrology has influenced the actions of political leaders, including Indira Gandhi and Ronald Reagan. In the US, 71% of newspapers have astrological columns. Astrology is also closely linked to alchemy. Most people imagine an alchemist as some crazy geek in a ramshackle tower trying to turn lead into gold and accidentally inventing chemistry. But alchemy was and is so much more. Alchemy is a peculiar combination of chemistry, philosophy, astrology, magic, medicine and, in a strange way, analytical psychology. In a nutshell, I would describe alchemy as experimental mysticism. Alchemy's primary concern is transformation and transmutation. The emblematic goal of European alchemy was turning cheap metals into gold, a metaphor for the path to enlightenment. Other goals were creating the elixir of life and the philosopher's stone, sometimes interpreted as the same thing. To achieve those goals, the alchemist must perform a series of operations, like calcination, dissolution, solidification, evaporation, putrefaction, separation and reunification. Those are both literal chemical instructions and metaphorical transformations of the psyche. Chinese alchemy more clearly distinguishes between Neidan, internal alchemy, and Weidan, external alchemy. The latter, the more ancient form of Chinese alchemy, was primarily concerned with compounding elixirs of immortality, while the former is an array of physical, mental, and spiritual practices used to prolong life and create an immortal spiritual body that would survive after death. For the longest time, alchemy and astrology were inseparable from science. Even Isaac Newton, one of the founding fathers of modern earthling science, was an astrologer and alchemist. Like astrology, alchemy is based upon the idea of invisible connections between macrocosmos and microcosmos. Some of them, like gravity and magnetism, turned out to be a real thing, others didn't. So, the separation between science and scientific humbug can only be made in hindsight. Unlike modern science, European alchemy was a secret science with a language clouded in allegories. The official goal was to keep the uninitiated out, but I suspect it was also because alchemists weren't quite sure whether they were exploring the workings of the heavenly spheres, the transformation of metals, or the perfection of their body and soul. Probably all of them simultaneously, because remember, in magic, everything is connected. As above, so below. Alchemy might not be useful for creating literal gold, but it is a treasure trove for anyone interested in earthling psychology. To explain this, we have to dive into a standard model for the earthling mind, invented by Carl Gustav Jung. In alien literature about earthlings, Jung's model is often compared to the masked mandrakes of 𝐂𝐡𝐚𝐩𝐬 3. A mandrake consists of three parts, the collective body, the personal body, and the head. The first two are buried, only the head is visible. It contains the eyebrain, the center of superficial brain functions. The collective body contains organs common to all mandrakes, including the male and female private parts, and first and foremost, the heart-brain, the real center of the mandrake's mind. The personal body contains custom organs, different ones for each mandrake, often created from the collective organs. Here, we also find the black bladder, where the organism dumps undesired chemicals. Finally, we have the head, the part with the eyebrain that sticks out of the ground, hidden behind the mask. The Jungian model of the earthling psyche is similar, but on a psychological level. There are three parts, the collective unconscious, the personal unconscious, and the conscious. The center of the conscious mind is the ego. It's hopefully connected to the self, the true center of the mind, deep down in the collective unconscious. The collective unconscious has nothing to do with a hive mind, it's simply the part of the unconscious that is common to all earthling minds, like lungs or kidneys are common to all earthling bodies. It contains the male and female aspects of the mind, as well as archetypes, primordial unconscious concepts or images common to all earthlings, like the innocent, the mother, the dragon, the devil, the ring snake, the flood or the apocalypse. Instances of those archetypes appear in the personal unconscious, they are called complexes. A powerful complex is the shadow, the aspects of the personality that the ego would very much like not to exist. The opposite of the shadow is the persona, the mask the ego shows to others, and to itself. What does this have to do with alchemy? Well, alchemy's goal is transformation, transforming lead into gold, but also perfecting one's own mind. To do so, the ego must connect with the self, a process Jung calls individuation. This is not an easy task, because it means leaving the comfort of the persona, going down into the unconscious and confronting one's complexes, in particular the shadow. But how to connect to one's unconscious? One possible way is dreams, that's when the complexes bubble to the surface like gas in a flask. Another one is via representations of archetypes. Many tarot cards, for example, correspond more or less to archetypes and contain symbols connected to archetypes, so one can try what resonates with one's complexes. Alchemy does more or less the same, alchemical texts are full of symbols and archetypes and contain allegorical recipes hinting at how to deal with them. The alchemical stages calcination, dissolution etc. can be interpreted as steps in the individuation process. Putrefaction, for example, corresponds to facing one's shadow, which is an essential step in the realization of the self. Unless you're a groundhog, of course. In this case, facing your shadow means 6 more weeks of winter. In this video, we can barely scratch the surface of Jungian psychology, alchemy and tarot. Also, I'm anything but an expert on the matter. Fortunately, I found an earthling called 𝐂𝐡𝐚𝐩𝐭𝐞𝐫𝐬, an expert in all 3 subjects, who was so kind to proofread this script. She also has an alien boyfriend and sometimes turns into a cat. Link to her site in the doobly-doo. Before we come to the question of why Earthlings would use magic, a word from our sponsor, the Time Cops.
We all know and love our galactic history, the glorious events that made the central galactic bureaucracy what it is today. The land of the loyal, home of the willing. But what if somebody changed it? Let's say some egalitarian time terrorist travels back in time and blows up the legendary Centauri command ship, Reasonable Outrage. In consequence, the liberation of the Crab Nebula never happens. The dissident planets aren't pacified. The cyber-anarchists gain the upper hand. The bureaucracy is dismantled and the galaxy is plunged into chaos and democracy. Wouldn't that be awful? But fear not. The Time Cops protect you. We constantly monitor the timeline and intervene whenever someone attempts to tamper with the status quo. We protect the past so that you can have a great future. Time Cops, we make history.
Why would Earthlings use magic anyway? What's the point of all this? As mentioned before, magic is an attempt to understand the world, to figure out why things happen, and to do something about it. But why didn't Earthlings notice that magic doesn't actually work? Earthling psychology might shed light on this. In the 1940s, psychologist B.F. Skinner did a famous experiment. You place some pigeons in cages and give them food at random intervals. The pigeons will memorize whatever they were doing when the food arrived, and repeat that movement over and over. One pigeon may bob its head, another one might swing like a pendulum, a third one might turn in circles, and so on. And because the food keeps coming randomly, each pigeon is convinced that its little ritual is making the food come. In other words, the pigeons have become superstitious. Earthlings are no different. If a village is waiting for rain, and one evening they do a little village dance and it starts pouring, they will be convinced that the dancing did it. Next time they need rain, they will do the dance again. If it rains, great, it works. If not, they must have done something wrong, so they repeat the dance the next day, and the day after, until it finally rains, which means that they did it right this time. Either way, they have the impression that their magic works. Rain dances are just one example of Earthlings using magic to cope with uncertainty. In the 1950s, the Polish anthropologist Malinowski found that Melanesian fishermen didn't resort to magic when fishing in safe waters with lots of fish but did so when fishing on the high seas, where the results are more uncertain. Even in industrialized societies, people tend to flock toward pseudoscience in times of economic uncertainty. And as mentioned before, some types of high-risk professionals seem more likely to use good luck charms. Why is this so? Earthlings don't have a ternary yes-no don't know logic like many aliens, but a binary yes-no logic. They don't accept the answer I don't know, it's random. Every information gap must be filled, and if they don't find reliable information, they make something up. And Earthlings are very good at making things up, especially hidden connections, invisible angels and demons, spiritual energy flows, powerful jinns, meddling ancestors, evil witches, lucky socks, mischievous fey folk and whatnot. In one word, magic. There is also a phenomenon called learned helplessness. When Earthlings have learned that they can nothing do about a bad situation, they will stop trying even when things change. Even the illusion that you can change your fate with spells might help to counteract this attitude. Replacing reality with illusions and facts with spiritual vibes is, of course, not always a good idea. When you're a politician, your decisions should probably be based on political facts rather than the position of the planets. When you have a life-threatening illness, refusing medical treatment in favor of acupuncture and crystal healing will probably kill you. And when your children have problematic mental conditions like ADHD, narcissism or being a spoiled brat, deciding they must be indigo children and treating them like angelic beings won't do them any good. Some claim that the souls of alleged indigo kids are of alien origin, sent to Earth to make it a better place. That is not the case. I double-checked with the responsible galactic authorities. Earth is not scheduled to receive any indigo, crystal, rainbow or star seed reincarnations before the year 2137. Earthlings generally seek a worldview that provides three things: certainty, meaning, and agency. Religion, science and magic cover those aspects in different proportions. Science provides a certain amount of certainty, or at least calculable probabilities. Religion's strong point is meaning. But both lack in the third point, agency. Earthlings' fate is either controlled by powerful ineffable beings or at the mercy of random events. That's where magic comes into play. It promises agency, taking control of one's fate by using occult connections in the universe or making supernatural beings do one's bidding. Note that the three approaches religion, science and magic aren't mutually exclusive, it's a cocktail. Most Earthlings blend the three together, depending on current needs. An Earthling might, for example, rely primarily on science, turn to religion on religious holidays or when they crave meaning, and resort to magic when desperate or bored. In episode 11, we saw that the primary purpose of rituals is to strengthen group coherence and values. Magical group rituals are no exception. For example, when an anti-witch in the bocage performs an unwitching ritual in a supposedly bewitched family, the whole family participates. This might be a way to strengthen the family coherence by designing an external culprit for internal conflicts. Earthlings call this a scapegoat. Another reason is that magic might help Earthlings deal with personal questions. A divination technique like I Ching or Tarot can be an excellent way for Earthlings to clarify their wishes, goals and fears. Not only do they need to formulate a question, but the random answers they get might speak to them on a deep level and give them ideas. This brings us to the last point, dealing with the unconscious. When you're a mentally unstable Earthling and you feel the urge to lock yourself in a laboratory and mess around with dangerous chemicals, doing alchemy might be a better way to deal with your problems than building a bomb or cooking meth. Joking aside, magical practices like alchemy and tarot can't create gold or predict lottery numbers, but they seem to open a gate to the unconscious and might be great tools for autotherapy and personal growth. To conclude, magic is one of Earthling's weird and interesting ways to deal with reality. It's as old as civilization, it's ever so popular today, and it's not going away in the foreseeable future. Many of my Earthling viewers will claim that they don't believe in magic at all. But, as the people in the bocage would say, you always believe in it more than you think. This episode is based on several books, in particular The History of Magic by Chris Gosden, Deadly Words by Jean Favre Sada, and Magic, a very short introduction by Owen Davis. This was the 20th episode of Earthlings 101. I think the next time we will talk about science, and then about religion. This way, we'll have a little trilogy about the three approaches to explain the world. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, forward me to your leader, and don't forget to be alien.